I warned you in our last lecture that one of the things you will have in your lifetime are many, 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 many boring meetings. And this is a demonstration of the official meeting minutes versus what really happened in the meeting. And as you can read down, 10:03, 10:05, 10:08. I love at 208 they were supposed to be talking about sales representative bonus policies, and the minutes of what really happened was that he looked out the window and a bird flew by, probably a sparrow. But my favorite was 1014 on the sales report, where they're talking about the numbers from sales and the CEO's reporting. And instead, what he's doing is counting the zeros on the printed agenda and filling them in with red pencil. So this makes me laugh because I've facilitated many meetings. I have been in many meetings, and let's learn as leaders how to get the most out of meetings and be the best facilitator we can for ourselves, for our teammates, and for our organization. So when we talk about meetings, we talk about two things. Number one is we have to balance between getting stuff done and the content and the outcome and the task at hand versus the people and the processes. So meaning you can't be too heavy on the content and task, or you're going to alienate the people who are doing it. If you don't worry about the people and do the finessing of the humans, no one's going to want to participate, and you're not going to get full participation, or you're not going to get that magic that happens, right, when groups are performing. And if you if you're too worried about the people in the process, you don't get stuff done. So as a facilitator, as a leader, you really have to balance the meet and why you're meeting, who you're meeting with, and what you want to get done. You can't have too much focus on getting stuff done at the expense of the people, but you can't be too people oriented and not worry about getting stuff done. So it's a fine balance. And as a facilitator and a leader, you'll need to find that balance. And again, finding that balance between task and process. Task meaning the content, the stuff getting done, the outcomes, the agenda. But then the process meaning the people who's going to be doing it. So what needs to get done and the how it's going to get done. You've got to build those dynamics and balance the way to get the most out of the meeting. And facilitation is the Greek stem of facilitation means to facilitate, and that means to make easy. So what we're going to be doing in this lecture is to talk about how to make it as easy as possible for you to have the most productive meetings. And it's definitely a skill set. Is this a hard skill? No, it's a soft skill. So facilitation and developing strong meetings that balance process and talent is a soft skill. And trust me, when people can facilitate good meetings, it's a gem. I've sat in so many bad meetings. This is why I'm championing this, because I really would love to stop all bad meetings. They're such a waste of time. And facilitators. So how you do that? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have those common goals and agendas. Remember, we had talked about we want a scope of work, we want an agenda, we want to make sure we know where we're going so we can get there. And another thing that would be helpful is, what does success look like? How will we know if we've been successful as a group? By having metrics that help us to indicate what success is. So you got to balance that then with the people part. And the people part is that people feel safe, they feel engaged, they feel welcome, they feel set up for success. So you want to make sure that the environment is conducive to people power. You want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity and an ability to participate willingly without repercussion. They can speak their mind. They can provide their opinions without feeling stupid or incriminated. They want to make sure that people take ownership. You want people to manage the group. You don't want just one person doing all of the group work. That I don't know if that's ever happened to you, where only one or two people of a group of 10 do stuff, and it gets really frustrating. And honestly, you're just lacking on so much human potential that isn't being contributed. You want relationships? I mean, some of the best relationships I've formed out of groups is because we were performing and humming along, and everyone was contributing meaningful, and we had some common outcome that we were all striving to be the best we could be. And so these relationships are long standing, and trust me, people will, remember you. It's a small world, and what you contribute in one group, will be remembered in other groups. So just keep that in mind. And again, you want not only the group to have a great experience, but each individual as part, the sum of the parts, and making sure that everyone, has that contribution ability individually, but then as a group, the outcomes are just second to none. So you have, as a leader, as a facilitator, to make this easy, you need to accomplish both the task and the human part. Now, as a facilitator, you're going to have basic responsibilities. And I think this is one of your questions on your assignments is, think about the person who is running the meeting, the facilitator, and did they do these things? So these are the basic responsibilities that as a leader, managing a meeting, running a meeting, facilitating a meeting, you'll want to make sure you do. First of all, you want to manage the process of the meeting, opening the body of the meeting where all the stuff gets done, and then wrapping it up. And, when you start a meeting, you should have done a lot of work before the meeting, like meaning for me to get ready for a good meeting, it would take me at least half a day, like meaning developing the agenda, getting all the resources, sending them out in plenty of time so that people can become prepared and read what they need to prepare. And I would think up questions for them to start, thinking about so that we could have a good discussion. Instead of asking people to do stuff in the meeting, I'd have them do a lot of prep before the meeting. So in the meeting, we could have really intimate and productive discussions. So there's a lot of work that gets done before you even start a meeting. Plus, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen after a meeting where I would schedule 1 or 2 hours just to be able to synthesize, post, follow up, answer questions, all that kind of stuff. So, make sure that when you're planning your life, when you have meetings, you do a lot of pre-work and a lot of post-work, and you give yourself time to be able to do that. And then other responsibilities are you're going to need to make sure that you have an objectives and agenda, that those are clear, that those are agreed upon so that everyone knows what the end is going to be and what success looks like. And then discussion, you have to ensure participation, that everyone is contributing meaningfully and has the, feels safe to do so, feels represented, feels comfortable. And, some people have a different level of comfort of speaking up in meetings. And typically when I'd have staff that weren't real comfortable with speaking up in meetings, I'd ask them beforehand, as I sent out stuff and was prepping for the meeting, I'd individually ask them, what do you think about this? Just to get their feedback in case they don't do it in the meeting. They didn't give it in the meeting. I had some really bright coworkers who wouldn't say a word in a meeting. And I was so frustrated because I wanted to contribute because I knew they could contribute so meaningfully, but they just weren't the kind of people that talked in meetings. Like some of you don't talk in class, and that doesn't mean that you don't contribute meaningfully. You don't do great work. I wish you would because you're brilliant, but you don't, and that's okay. And so as a facilitator, I need to manage that. I need to make sure that if you're not participating, that you're still being able to provide your input in other ways. And I can do that in other ways. I don't have to do it just in the meeting. But as a facilitator, you want to think about that. And if there's any questions or concerns or comments, just make sure that there's time for people to ask questions in a way that is safe. Again, staying on track, staying on time. I've been in so many meetings where, they had 16 agenda items and you only got through the first 2 because you just got stuck. And there's nothing more debilitating than that, or depressing. So make sure you stay on track, stay on time. Meetings start on time, they end on time, and you got to make sure you give enough time to get the stuff done. That's why people might need to have pre-work. They might need to read some stuff. They might need to ponder some questions. They might have to come with their notes. So the more you can engage people outside of the meeting to get the meeting right to the heart of it, the reasons to meet. Remember, we talked about the reasons to meet. And then again, follow up. You make sure you have lots of time for follow up, because you need to follow up to good meetings and provide the follow up that's necessary to keep the machine working. All right. So everyone is assured that they know what they're responsible for. And a lot of times, if I have ongoing meetings, my follow up is what I start with to plan the next meeting. I in plenty of time before the next meeting, I tickle people. Hello, tickle, tickle. You were responsible for this, and our meeting's in 4 days. days, so you've got time to get it done if you haven't done it for the whole month. You know what I mean? So follow-up's really important, and it helps keep you on track. Okay, so this is an important slide when you do your assignment, when you're talking about the facilitator at a recent meeting you attended. Did they do these things? Okay, that's what their main goals are. Now, when we open the meeting, again, remember, it's important for people to get to know one another, to build trust, to, realize we're all human. And, again, relationships are key. So do an icebreaker, do something that helps to facilitate the cohesive whole. That's always helpful. Now, if a group is performing, they might not need the icebreaker. They might be at a level of trust and sincerity and understanding where it's not necessary, but it's still nice to, check in with everybody. How are you doing? And, what was the highlight of your week last week? Or, what are you planning? What's your plans for summer vacation? Something, just to keep the group cohesive. And you want to welcome everyone. You want to make sure that all of the leadership and the roles and who's doing what is identified and clarified. And ground rules is something that we'll talk about in the next few slides. Again, a very important component for people to have a social foundation of how the group is expecting others to act. And then, you look at the objectives and the agenda. Those should have been sent out ahead of time. And if necessary, for very formal meetings, you might need to review and approve the minutes from the previous meeting. So every meeting, depending on how formal or informal, it's going to have a process. And, the process can probably be improved, or there could be things that could be added or done prior to the meeting or during the beginning of the meeting to make the meeting more effective. Introductions, really important. We talked about it, especially for forming. They help build trust and provide information so that, one of the things I'll never forget is someone who talked about how they had just come from Paris and I was going to Paris. And so it was just nice to find and connect with someone who had just recently had an experience, and I could, learn a couple of things as was going. It was fun. You never know what you're going to learn through these introductions, as well as not only for the participants are introductions great, but for the facilitator, because sometimes you can identify strengths and opportunities within your group. You can also understand if there might be problems with bias or judgments, or if, people might not be interested, they might be a little lukewarm. So there's a lot of things you can learn from introductions as a facilitator that can help you future. And the more you use introductions or just, get people in a community understanding and moving along together, it's very helpful. And there's so many different things you can do. I mean, gosh, the internet is your lack of creativity is where you're gonna, it's all about just whatever you want to do. And again, I don't like to start at one end and go around the other end, because people on the other side of the room are just counting down and checking out or worried about their own introduction. So make it as non-threatening as possible. And, it's nice to collect the wisdom. I love collecting the number of years of people who, have been in, like, if I would collect the number of years that you guys have been in college as a cohesive group, I could probably say that we have over 120 years of experience, of college experience in this room. I mean, that's pretty powerful. So that's the kind of stuff you can do. I love doing, like, when I do community groups, I'll have like cutouts of big feet, like almost Bigfoot feet, on the ground, and it says "This way to a great experience." And in the door, I might have a welcome sign, just to make people feel really comfortable. And you could have people interview each other. You could give them questions. There's so many different, we've done in our class one word check-ins. I mean, there's just lots of different ways. Again, your creativity is your limitation, but lots of information on the web for that to do fun introductions. And then this is ground rules. And I love this phrase, prevention before intervention. If there's a community understanding of how groups perform and what is expected of each of the individual members, then, people tend to conform, and then you don't have, any crazy wackadoos to worry about, or people who are not allowing the meeting group to go forward. And, these are rules that the group develops, that you all observe, and it helps. A lot of times groups will hold other team members accountable so you don't have to. And a lot of times we can put them up on a flip chart, we can put them on the board, we can make them on a poster, put them on something on the canvas, And again, it's discussing how the team behaves and works together. I mean, I gave you an example of the syllabus is, ground rules, but that's not a real collaborative effort. This is one of the ground rules we created in a community meeting. And, it's all about, we're here to, we're prompt and regular in attendance. We listen, we don't over talk each other. We get our work done. We provide feedback and receive it and appreciate. We keep confidences, so what goes on in the meeting stays in the meeting. And, so these are the things that they came up with. And so I have them posted, and available so that everyone can look at them at every meeting. And these are, how we manage our group as humans. It's nice to have some rules of behavior and rules of engagement. So these ground rules are great because, again, if you're in a group project, it's always nice to know what are the rules of us working together and what are the expectations, because some people might think that following up in 72 hours is okay, where other people expect you to follow up in 6. So managing expectations, managing the behavior and helping people to intervene when necessary is very helpful, these ground rules. So it's worth taking the time to do it. And I love this. There's another Dilbert. I'm getting a lot of complaints about you being late for meetings. And this guy goes, they never talk about anything important in the first 10 minutes. And his coworker says, well, they're usually talking about you being late. And the guy goes, why would I need to be there for that? Oh, it's pretty funny. So, again, it's there. It's just to help create the ground mores, the morals, the execution of the group, and it kind of keeps everyone in the straight and narrow. All right, so the facilitator, again, needs to clarify, why are we meeting? What needs to get done? What we want to get done? What's the outcome, the end goal? How are we going to do it? Because again, we got to balance task with humans, task with process, task getting things done with how we're going to get it done, so we don't, spend too much, don't worry about the humans at the expense of getting stuff done. So, make sure that everyone understands what we're doing, and you should have an agenda. I mean, every meeting should have an agenda, and this is probably a gold star agenda. I mean, I've seen agendas of all different shapes and sizes and formats, and this is probably one of my favorite, and it takes time to make it. So it's not an easy agenda. You don't just list things, but you're developing the objective, the attendees, again, so keeping people honest, because if you can't be there, there's a little line down at the bottom that says absent, and the reasons why, and then the date, the time, and the location. It's always important to put that, or put your Zoom link or whatever is necessary, because people will check the agenda to know where they need to go. And then on this agenda, there were 3 objectives. So the items that we were discussing was determine recipes for a store tour, and then to make how we're going to market the tour, and then how we're going to get donations. So these are the 3 things we needed to do. And what I love with meetings is to give everyone a responsibility and have it shift, like meaning, people will facilitate, people will prep, people will take notes. And also I love that item about items to bring to the meeting so that everyone knows what they need to do. So in an email, I'll attach the agenda. I'll maybe put some prompts on what they need to think about for each of these items and everyone's role. So you can see that it's very, very structured, laid out. And my job is to make sure that Gupa, Wayne, and Lawrence are ready to go, and they have enough time, help to facilitate. And these are the things we want to get done. It's very, very cut and dried. So this really helps people get stuff done. Okay. In terms of also, it helps encourage that everyone takes responsibility and ownership of the meeting results. Now, in the body of the meeting, that's where we're talking about the recipes, the marketing, the donations. And this is where, you might use techniques to help brainstorm, help develop and solve problems, how to make decisions. And, this is making sure that within the 15 minutes, you can move through all of these to know where you need to go. And this is the art and science of facilitation. And this is why it could be helpful for people to do pre-work, because 15 minutes isn't a long time, but yet you want to have full participation, engagement, and a meaningful outcome. So this is where, the body of the meeting is where, you get stuff done. And this is where you're going to want to make sure that you engage the people and the processes together to result in a satisfied outcome. And participation, again, is one of the biggest challenges, is that you don't want just certain people to talk. You want everyone to contribute meaningfully. And if people aren't going to raise their hand or feel comfortable talking, and that's okay, you might want people to be able to brainstorm on note cards that they give to you, or you might want to do a gallery stroll where you have flip charts and people stroll around and give their ideas. And, then you debrief on everybody's brainstorming. You might want to talk to people who are more quiet before the meeting to get their ideas and ask if you can share their ideas. So, or you can, encourage participation by asking. I know you've been in a place where people said, let's hear from someone who hasn't spoken in a while. You can, there's just so many different options. Again, your creativity is your limitation. It's almost like a check-in with your dipstick. How are we doing? Thumbs up, thumbs down, neutral. You could also have people, you could give them a list of things to vote on and have them come up and use little stickers, and there's 5 things to vote on, but they only get 3 stickers. And again, it's the group dynamic and allowing the group to decide. So if, for the example with planning this market tour, you remember that agenda I showed you. What if we were planning the recipes, we would brainstorm different recipes that we would want to make, and then the final decision would be the group. And so we would have all of the decisions, all of the ideas for recipes for our market tour there, and I'd give people 3 stickers, and then they would come up, and there might be 6 ideas of recipes, but they only get to pick 3 in the top 3 recipes. That's what we're doing. Okay. Whether mine was in there or not, it doesn't matter, because again, it's group cohesion. And so it's everybody performing together and working towards a common goal. And so that's what we do to facilitate. We help that happens, because there's no point in having a meeting. Again, remember, if the decisions are already made. If I made the decision on what recipes I want to include, then why are we having a meeting, right? I've already decided. So again, don't have a meeting for a meeting's sake. I mean, you could tell people what recipes you're going to be doing in an email, right? Okay. But if you want, contributions, brainstorming, problem solving, that kind of stuff, then that's a reason to meet. And one thing I want to talk to you about is groupthink. And groupthink is a theory of management that it's a concept that describes a consensus that isn't thoughtful or thorough. And what happens is that a lot of times groups will be like, well, I think we should do that. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, good. Let's do that. Okay, bye. Okay, we're done. Let's move on. Okay. And it's like, instead of challenging or considering or supporting or, allowing for alternative brainstorming and even crazy ideas. We don't want that. We don't want to move so fast at the point where we haven't experienced or exhausted alternatives. And we don't want the group to just say, sure, let's do it, without having to really think about it. So again, this is why pre-planning is nice, to give people more time to, some shower time. That's what we used to call it at the county. Just give me some shower time, because we all would think of the shower. And just give them some time to ponder and come ready. And again, as a facilitator, you're managing that process with humans and with tasks. So making sure that everyone feels comfortable to be able to brainstorm and contribute meaningfully, and that knowing that there might be challenging or tension or arguments, and that's okay. You got to move through that, right? Okay. And then finally, you want to ensure that there's commitment to action again. So if you have that action, the outcome outlined on your agenda as to where you want to get, then you're ready to determine who's going to do what and when. And this is so important, because have you ever been in a meeting where nothing gets done and you're just kind of like, what's the point? Because nothing's going to continue to be worked on in between meetings. Oh, I used to hate that. So the thing is, you want people to commit. And so your facilitation process is making sure post meeting that this kind of stuff gets done. And you need to assign it. You need to have a date. You need to have specific duties outlined. So commitment to action, that's part of your facilitation process. process to make sure that everyone is being part of the outcome. And again, you might need to at the end recap, today we talked about this. This is what happened. This is who said they would do what. This is when it's going to get done. This is when we're meeting again, blah, 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 blah. And finally, talk about what has been agreed upon in next steps, so you could just say, Eric has identified that he will do this, this, and this. Eric, anything else you want to add? No, we are good. Gupta has said they were going to do this, this, and this. Anything you want to add? No, perfect. Denise, you said you've done this, do. So as a facilitator, it's again making sure that there is outcomes guaranteed. The people are committed, they are engaged, they are incorporated and empowered, and you are leaving knowing exactly what needs to get done. Again, commitments to action are so important in between meetings. And what I highly recommend is, you do a recap. So after the meeting, you've got to send the follow-up information. It's usually the minute meetings. It's a specific, detailed account of who's doing what, maybe in a chart form, whatever's most important. And then, if you need to do any tickle files or any kind of, alerts to make sure that things are moving forward, that's your job as a manager. Okay. So, as a manager, if you were facilitating a meeting, you're going to spend a lot of time preparing for the meeting, not just 5 minutes, before the meeting, rough out a quick agenda so that the paper's still warm when people come into the conference room from the photocopier. This stuff needs to be thought out, and that agenda sample I showed you, one of my students took it and used it for one of her meetings that she said she was having, and she said it was one of the most productive meetings she's ever had at her organization. So she changed the whole organizational process with meetings by incorporating this agenda. I know it's a lot, but it really helps to manage what needs to get done and the people process so that you can get the people involved, you can ensure the people continue to stay involved, and also get stuff done and be very clear on what your outcomes are. So, pre-planning, so important. Get people primed and pumped and ready to get into the meeting to do what you're meeting for, which is to engage and to discuss and to brainstorm and to solve problems. And then make sure at the end there's follow-up so that everyone is clear as to what needs to get done. So you need time to do. That's why meetings are such a time suck. Is if you do them well, preparing for the meeting, doing the meeting, following up to the meeting, it's a lot of work. And then you just want to do this to make sure. I love this comic. What did you take away from the meeting? As this guy's carrying a conference chair. Oh, that's so funny. You want the most productive meetings possible. Meetings take up a lot of time, and you can get the most out of your meetings by being a facilitator to make it easy and to follow all those steps that I've provided. All right. Looking forward to hearing your ideas from meetings you've attended, the good, the bad, and the ugly, probably more ugly than anything. That's okay. But I'm looking forward to hearing your reactions in our assignment this week. Okay, take care. Thanks.